I've had my share of tick bites in my 30s. Was diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis, and I got to tell you,
Oh, wow.
that since 2016, since I've been able to get good, clean weed, good, clean medical marijuana that's been third-party lab tested, I have not had an episode.
One of the things that happens with folks with chronic Lyme is, they get diagnosed with these things that aren't untrue, but what our regular allopathy doesn't do enough of is then say, okay, we have arthritis, but why do you have arthritis?
Yeah.
Welcome to Season 6 of the Cannabis Truth Podcast, where we speak the language of cannabis freely and uncensored while educating our audience on safe use of this live plant therapy. You should know what's in your cannabis, what's good and what's not, because cannabis does not come with an FDA stamp of approval, yet. The information you will find here comes straight from scientists and clinicians, doing the work and reporting their findings in reputable outlets. Hopefully, we can inspire you to research the facts as we know them today. Cannabis is an amazing alternative in health remedies, with the potential to alleviate typical disease problems and troubling side effects, even those caused by synthetic prescriptions. Here now is the host of the Cannabis Truth Podcast. She is a 21st century cannabis shaman, not a doctor, not a scientist. Raised by nuns and wolves in the verdant cattle pastures of the Oklahoma oil fields, here to amplify the truth of this great big story of cannabis in historical, political, scientific, and spiritual terms, so you can make educated decisions about the medicine you choose to ingest. Please welcome Honey Smith Walls.
Hiya, David Aronson. I am so delighted that you could join the Cannabis Truth Podcast and help our audience understand more about what I learned in your lecture recently at Cannabis Public School. Just a little back up here, audience. You've heard me talk about Cannabis Public School, founded by Mo Smith, who's an RN and a BSN and has lots of letters behind her name. And she's leading the charge in helping people learn about cannabis and therapies and la, la, la. So David Aronson was on last Sunday, and wow, what a lecture. And I begged him to come on here so that we could continue that talk. Thank you, David.
Sure. Happy to be here.
Tell everybody about yourself.
Well, I'm by title, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, although I'm not doing clinical work anymore, but I maintain my license. I grew up in Maine, and I spent lots of time outside, which is lots of fun, but also brought many tick bites over the years. And, back then, we knew of Lyme disease, but it wasn't up in Maine because it was too cold, they would say. I remember having a couple of ticks on my head that were engorged. And what we did at the time, to the best of my father's knowledge, was you got a paper clip red hot and you poked the tick so that you basically killed it and it would let go. And then you could remove it. Because you don't want to get any pieces of it left in you, because that can cause a paralysis. But what that does do, unfortunately, is that makes the tick regurgitate all of its some contents, into your body much faster than it would have otherwise. Because when a tick gets attached, it can take some, depending on what pathogen, it can take different amounts of time for it to transmit. But if you just kill it while it's on you, that's a way to get all of whatever it has. Anyway, so I grew up in Maine, and both my parents were therapists. I took a very circuitous route to this path. I studied medieval history, where I learned how to research things. And then I also did whatever I could around film, because I wanted to be a filmmaker. Right after college, I moved out to California with $1,400 in traveler's checks.
Oh my God!
And I did have a cell phone though while I drove cross country, and I had about 20 jobs in 1 year, and out in California, and worked on a lot of sets for free. And then I moved home, and I took every single dollar I had, and I made my own movie. Wow. Flicks when they still sent out in the mail. And all the local video stores. But so I thought I would, and I thought I would make money from it, or I would. My thought at the time was, here's a way I can be an artist. But and I did a lot of wedding videos, and then the economy crashed, and I went back to school. But all that time, I learned a lot about cannabis and how it's grown, and different ways it can help people. And I always knew for myself how it was helpful for me, in that it just made because of the various autoimmune issues I have, it just makes my body feel fine. And so that's how I came to know it as a medicine. And then in my work with Dustin Sulak is located in Maine, and he's an early pioneer doctor writing recommendations. And so I would see lots of his patients, and I just did lots and lots of research, and it opened up my eyes. And then about Lyme disease, when I got Lyme disease, I did lots and lots of research, and I was like, oh God, okay. Apparently many of my clients that I thought I was wondering why doesn't anything help them? Who are these? What is all these seizure disorders of unknown etiology? And they're getting on loads of Depakote and all sorts of, and like antidepressants aren't working, and nobody's sleeping, and well, I feel fine, but I've got this tremor for no reason, like all kinds of stuff that I saw with people, or depression that just, there's nothing going wrong in life, but they just unrelenting depression, meds don't work, but they would always have some sort of physical ailment connected to it that was chronic, and also sort of not easily diagnosable, or diagnosed as a type of syndrome. So that's how I got there. Probably answered more than you asked.
No. It's great. I'm sitting here jotting down notes because I got so much. And congratulations on the courage it took to go out to California and do all that you did. Really.
Thank you. That's the first time anybody's ever said that to me about that.
Well,
thank you. That's really nice. It was so much hubris.
Yeah.
To get that back with the knowledge I have now would be so nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I got a tick story for you. What you told me just blew me away about the paper clip and getting it red hot and, all of that. So I too was raised near the woods, and we were always, getting checked for ticks. And I remember when I was about 2 years old, my cousin and I came in from playing, and oh my Lord, they found one on his little tallywhacker. And you know what women did back in those days? And I'm talking 1956.
I don't know.
Hi, Honey Smith Walls here. I'm host of the Cannabis Truth Podcast, weekly for the past 6 years. But today I'm inviting you to a Facebook group called the Holistic Relief Summit, in hopes that you too will come for the peace and stay for the epiphanies. It's a beautiful space for women to find all kinds of relief from all kinds of suffering. Come join us for free.
Well, hello, I'm Dr. Philip Blair, and I want to introduce you to Honey Smith Walls. And she recently had an experience with beta-caryophyllene.
For years, I've been dealing with lots of arthritis pain and pain from neuropathy that has not been resolved through other prescriptive methods. As an advocate educator in the cannabis industry, I learn lots of interesting information about the compounds within the plants, and one of those turned out to be beta-caryophyllene.
What was your first dose like?
I was gobsmacked. Absolutely gobsmacked. It has given me my future back.
I want to get it out to everybody too. I want to get it out to the whole world, as a matter of fact. It has so many mitigating factors for all the stresses of life and pain and diseases. It is unbelievable, the spectrum of care that it can provide.
And oh my Lord, they found one on his little tallywhacker. And you know what women did back in those days? And I'm talking 1956.
I don't know.
They got their nail polish out and they painted
Suffocated it
thickly over the tick at the bite, and the tick would release.
Yeah.
So my little cousin had a little pink tallywhacker for a long time before that little sucker let go.
Yeah. I had a client one time. People will listen to this PSA, public service announcement. If you get a tick on a part of your body like that, and it's very sensitive, go to a doctor. Just go to a doctor. They will know what to do. I had a client once that got one on his scrotum, and he called me. I was like, I wouldn't want to go to the ER and I have them do it for you. He's like, okay. It's like,
people don't realize how important that is. But all my life, I got to tell you, I just ripped those little fuckers off. Pardon my French.
Mm-hmm. But, me too. Right up until into my 20s, I would go. There was this friend of mine lived just up the road from where I live now, and like it was like a running joke. Like you come back from hanging out at his house, and you'd have to like brush off ticks. You'd always find them.
Right.
The ones you find are not the ones that bite you.
Right. That's the kicker, ain't it? Yeah. We'd go hunting with our grandfather, and he would just, lock down our bodies, at wrist and ankles and neck, and spray our britches.
That's the best thing you can do is prevention, because they're not going anywhere. They're coming out with all sorts of medications too. There's some medications where you can like take it, and for like a couple of weeks you'll be immune to Lyme, but they carry over a dozen different things. And so, and there's over a dozen different strains of Lyme that don't respond to
oh my Lord, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's wild.
I did not know that. I'll tell you something else. You talked about a myth that ticks fall down from the trees and leaves.
Yeah, they do not.
They do not.
They do not. They generally don't move at all, except, are you from the South? I'm picking up an accent.
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
So down south, there is the Lone Star tick. And they're actually up here now. So they're really kind of everywhere, but they're seekers. So most ticks will just lay and wait for something to come get it. That's how they're so efficient. They can just basically be dormant until something touches them. But Lone Star ticks will go running looking for things. And Lone Star ticks commonly will have like rickettsia or rickettsia. And then down south, you've got the alpha gall allergy or alpha gall virus that causes an allergy to red meat, which can be treated. But the problem with the allergy to red meat is it's a delayed anaphylaxis. So you go to your steak dinner and you wouldn't know until you got home that you were gonna, so it can be very dangerous.
Oh my gosh!
I know, it's terrible. Totally ruins the outdoors. So like, put on your layers, put your socks over your pants. Don't care about how you look. I use the chemicals. I prefer picaridin, because DEET melts plastics, which is kind of creepy.
So
but I learned that from fishing. Well, fishing taught me that it broke my fishing line would break from the DEET.
Oh my gosh!
Because anything under 30% is not effective against ticks, and so you got to use if you're going to use DEET, you have to use the high percentage stuff, and that's what makes it dangerous. So I like picaridin, and it lasts 8 hours.
Is that Picaridin? Picaridin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you can get clothing that's impregnated with permethrin. You can just buy a can of permethrin and treat your shoes. That will do so much good, because ticks die on contact with permethrin. But it's not, once it's dry, it's not harmful to us. It's derived from geraniums. You definitely don't want to breathe it or eat it or anything like that, or put it on your skin. But you can put it on your clothes and let it dry. But I just use the shoes. That's what we do in my family.
Okay.
because it's still
So
kind of
could you get that at a feed store? Like I'm up here.
Pretty much every hardware store has permethrin.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a really common thing. Permethrin, yeah. Permethrin, I think.
Yep. Okay.
It's a really common insecticide. It's what they use to spray your yard too. Yeah. I love nature and I don't want to kill bees, but I don't want to die. I live in the woods. Like where I live, unfortunately, is like the hottest spot in the globe for Lyme disease.
No.
And so you can do landscape design so what I've done on our properties, I've beat down to the dirt about 2 feet between the tree line and our yard.
I
so
see.
they just don't like to cross that. And then you treat the yard and the rocks with permethrin and all that stuff. And then you, when you go out in the woods, like I said, you just cover up and you stay on the path and you check and just do a tick check every day in the summer.
Yeah.
Actually, anything over 38 degrees, they're moving around. So it's, So you really just have to be careful all the time.
I was really tickled to hear you mention Dr. Dustin Sulak's name because he's my big hero in cannabis. Everybody's, he's so amazing. And I also studied him and got his certifications. And he talks about Lyme quite often in his lectures that he does monthly. Do you get to go to those lectures?
I've been to a few. And I see him at the conferences and
absolutely,
yeah. I always love watching his talks because I always learn something new from him. The Lyme is a big part of his practice there because one of the major issues is that the treatment protocols and test. Well, first of all, the testing. There's better testing now, but it's slowly evolving. But the standardized test is so bad. In Virginia, there was a state law that doctors had to disclose to you, hey, this test has a 40% false negative.
Oh, my gosh.
Which is essentially useless.
Right.
Right? And then when it's positive, they make you get another test to determine if it's an active or dormant infection. It's just... And the thing is, Lyme will change. So the testing's just the thing people need to know is the testing's not good. And so there are companies that specialize in this. One that takes insurance that's better than others is Medical Diagnostics Laboratory. But there are specialized labs like IGenX, IGENX. They'll take Medicare, but you generally have to pay out of pocket to get quality care and treatment for Lyme. Unless you catch it very, very early.
No.
So here's the best thing. If you get a tick bite, so what I recommend to people is make a contract now with your PCP. Okay. Before anything goes wrong. Say, hey, look, I just learned a bunch about Lyme disease. And I learned that the standardized treatment is just 2 weeks of doxycycline. Is more often than not enough, and that there are multiple infections that may require additional testing or additional treatments. So, but what I also learned is that if people get on doxycycline the day they get a tick bite and stay on it for 3 weeks, the odds of them developing any kind of long-term chronic thing goes almost to nothing. As long as they make sure they test for things like Babesia, because that's a blood parasite that just won't be treated by doxycycline and is very commonly carried by ticks. But if you catch it early, it can be treated well with your anti-malaria drugs. So and what's amazing is that we're just not educated in the United States about vector-borne illness, right? Because we live in our suburbs and all this stuff that's everything's bubbled for us so that we don't get any nature on us, which is, I have no problem with that per se. But what then happens is we're not educating people about how nature does get on us, right? And so the rest of the world is very aware of tick illness and and the risks of that, and will aggressively treat early on and stuff like that. But Lyme has this weird conspiracy around it. It's an actual conspiracy. And so I recommend people watch the film Under Our Skin.
Okay.
This is a documentary that was produced in 2008 by PBS. It's very well done. But since it was 2008, it's now free to view on YouTube.
Okay.
And there's a sequel called Emergence. And you don't have to watch, but just know that everybody that's featured in the first one does get better. And it shows that in the sequel. Because it's very depressing.
Oh.
Yeah. But if you want to understand why is Lyme so it's just going to tell you why. It's not going to, it's going to tell you how. It's not going to tell you why.
I have a dear friend whose wife had a seriously long dance with Alzheimer's. He thought was brought on by tick bite, Lyme disease,
that's
undiagnosed, untreated.
Yeah. There's hard scientific evidence for this. The work of Alan McDonald, people can look up as a pathologist, and he did a study very early on with Harvard Alzheimer's brains. And he isolated the spirochete next to the injury that's associated with causing Alzheimer's, and the New England Journal of Medicine wouldn't print the article because they didn't want to cause a widespread panic. And so it's just a letter to the editor. It's like a photographic evidence. So it can, and when it's not really Alzheimer's when that happens, it's Lewy body dementia. But the symptoms are exactly the same. But it can cause Alzheimer's in a sense, because if we think of Alzheimer's with the beta amyloid plaques, like the beta amyloid plaques don't actually cause the illness. The beta amyloid plaques exist to sequester and protect the brain from pathogens. And when you get too much of that there, then it starts to interfere with the signals.
So what do you say about cannabis relieving suffering?
So the amazing thing about cannabis and Lyme is nobody's researched it. I'm working on it, but nobody's researched it. And that everything that Lyme, that cannabis is known to treat very well, arthritis. That other things don't treat that well. Arthritis, MS, ALS, Parkinson's. So Parkinson's is a funny one because now they have this better test to test actual dopamine levels, and so many people that were diagnosed early on with Parkinson's now sometimes have Parkinsonian-like syndrome because they have all the symptoms of Parkinson's, but they don't have this dopamine deficiency, and that's something that can be caused by Lyme. I had a client who was diagnosed with Parkinson's, was being treated for Parkinson's, was tanking, got a Lyme test, found that she had Lyme, got on antibiotics, got better. Not all the way better, but got her life back.
Yeah.
So and then cannabis is known to treat all those things very well. Lyme can cause all of those things.
Yeah.
It's a relatively common cause of arthritis, fibromyalgia, things like that, especially if you're in an area where tick-borne illness is very common.
I've had my share of tick bites, and in my 30s was diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis. And I got to tell you,
oh wow,
that since 2016, since I've been able to get good, clean weed, good, clean medical marijuana that's been third-party lab tested, I have not had an episode of that debilitating, fatigue and all of that mess. And since 2016, I'm using clean cannabis that helps.
And that's one of the best things.
You see it?
Yeah.
Ever.
With one of the things that happens with folks with chronic Lyme is, they get diagnosed with these things that aren't untrue, but what medicine, what our regular allopathy doesn't do enough of is then say, okay, we have arthritis, but why do you have arthritis?
Yeah.
They just say, here, take this to make your pain go away. And these things then will build up over time because they're not really doing the thing that you want, or they're not getting at the root of the problem. Like, so before I was diagnosed with Lyme, I was on a medication to help me sleep. I was on a medication to help me stay awake. I was on a medication to help with stress, right? And I all these things were used responsibly. I never had any problems, but I was not getting any better. Now, when I found out I had Lyme, I was like, oh my God, all this stuff is, like a lot of it's physiologically driven.
Yeah.
I got rid of all of the medicines. And when I was at my sickest is a period of time when I had stopped using cannabis for a while. And so I went back to cannabis, got rid of all the medications and antibiotics. So one of the best things about cannabis and Lyme is it's the best palliative treatment because it's anti-inflammatory properties. Because Lyme is an inflammatory disease.
Aren't they all?
Yes, but this one in particular, it really that's how it works. It just keeps this sort of subacute inflammation going, keeps you alive for it, but it just makes living very difficult. And there are severe cases where people can die, but most of the time it's this subacute. Like for me, it was back pain in my 20s. And they were like, yeah, you have the osteoarthritis of a 40-year-old, but everybody gets osteoarthritis. I was like, but, and so if it weren't for my curious and contrary nature, I would have never figured it out, which is sort of, affirming and difficult at the same time.
Right. David, are you going to write a book about all of this?
I won't, but if anybody ever wanted to,
once you research,
help them. Sure, I'd help them do it, but no. I just try to teach, and I try to teach people that have contact with many other people. So that's why I concentrate on health professionals. So that I know every person in that room that's learning this information is connected to maybe hundreds of patients.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. All right. Well, at least you're doing the good work.
Thanks.
And I so appreciate it because our medical professionals, have a hard time listening about cannabis or any other discovery of, disease that hasn't passed by their medical education in university.
It's not their fault either. These are all good people trying to do good things for the most part. I mean, the bell curve is everywhere. So there are some that are terrible, awful sociopaths, but you're probably not going to encounter them. But they have belief systems. And so, it dawned on me one time I was at the Cannabis Scientific Conference in Providence, and a nurse said that she was just getting over all the guilt that she was experiencing of recommending opioids to combat veterans for so many years because she now knew cannabis could have been more helpful to them. And so I think there's a kernel in there that's a big part of why it's such a slow thing to change, is because there aren't that kind of humility is pretty rare in human beings. To say it out loud, and so and then you've got physicians that attract a certain type of personality that is not always going to have a lot of humility anyway, and so that's why education is so important. So we have to just insert it, because those people aren't, people are going to always be people and continue to be people. So we've got to just keep getting the correct information in.
Yeah. And it's opening up. More and more medical professionals are coming to the scientific understanding of the ECS, the endocannabinoid system, and that changes everything for their base of knowledge. So, and you just can't deny the truth like that. You just can't.
Yeah.
So, and if you do, you're just, it's obvious that, everything's obvious, isn't it? Anyway, David, how can our audience get in touch with you to?
Find me on LinkedIn. Just search David Aronson LCSW on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way. Yep.
It has been wonderful to have you come and visit, and I can't wait to see you again, both, at Cannabis Public School and Dr. Sulak's lectures and around. I know we know a lot of the same circle of medical pros, and I just love being here with you. Thank you for all your help today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you too. Take care.
Bye.
You've been listening to another Cannabis Truth podcast with 21st century cannabis shaman Honey Smith Walls. Using cannabis mindfully as medication is a different concept in Western healthcare philosophy, specifically over the past century. There's a lot to learn and reconsider. The scientific truth of cannabis is finally getting out and is wide open for all to see at respected medical sites like the National Library of Medicine at pubmed.gov and the Journal of American Medical Association at JAMAnetwork.com. We here at the Cannabis Truth Podcast are right there in the thick of it, alongside the titans of medicine, as a fly on the wall. We are not doctors, nor did we go to medical school, but we have taken dozens of private cannabis courses and still engage in continuing education offered by expert cannabis scientists. Over the past few years, we slowly began to see and understand the bigger picture. Now we hear from people all day long about cannabis. It is so important to use verifiably safe products. The process of getting a diagnosis from your family doctor and taking your records to a cannabis specialist can lead you to the correct cannabinoid therapy for your specific issues. Otherwise, you're simply your own guinea pig looking for answers without the foundational knowledge or ability to determine your best strategy. To find a qualified cannabis expert in your area, visit cannabisclinicians.org. This is a national society of cannabis experts. Look for the link in the show notes. Unless otherwise proven by a reputable third-party lab test, please regard all street weed as contaminated. It may do grave harm to a patient with a delicate immune system who already has inflammatory issues like arthritis, IBS, fibromyalgia, or worse. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you find value and understanding through the conversations you've heard on this podcast.